Russia bombs cities across Ukraine at rush hour in apparent revenge strikes. Russia bombed cities across Ukraine during rush hour on Monday morning, killing civilians and destroying infrastructure in apparent revenge strikes after President Vladimir Putin declared an explosion on the bridge to Crimea to be a terrorist attack. Missiles tore into Kyiv, the most intense strikes on the capital since Russia abandoned an attempt to capture it in the early weeks of the war. Explosions were also reported in Lviv, Ternopil and Zhytomyr in Ukraine's west, Dnipro and Kremenchuk in central Ukraine, Zaporizhia in the south and Kharkiv in the east. A witness in Russia's Belgorod region near the Ukrainian border also heard a blast from the border area. And Kyiv, attacks struck in the heart of the busy city center. The body of a man in jeans lay in a street at a major intersection, surrounded by flaming cars. In a park, a soldier cut through the clothes of a woman who lay in the grass to try to treat her wounds. Another woman was bleeding nearby. City police said at least 5 people had been killed and 12 wounded. A huge crater gaped next to a children's playground in a central Kyiv park. The remains of an apparent missile were buried, smoking in the mud. More volleys of missiles struck the capital again later in the morning. Pedestrians huddled for shelter at the entrance of metro stations and inside parking garages. "They are trying to destroy us and wipe us off the face of the earth," President Volodymyr Zelensky said on the Telegram messaging app. The air raid sirens do not subside throughout Ukraine. There are missiles hitting. Unfortunately, there are dead and wounded. Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba tweeted, "They are trying to destroy us and wipe us off the face of the earth." At one of Kyiv's busiest road junctions, a massive crater had been blown in the intersection. Cars were destroyed, buildings were damaged and emergency workers were on the scene. 2 cars and a van near the crater were completely wrecked, blacked and pitted from shrapnel. Windows had been blown out of buildings at Kyiv's main Taras Shevchenko University. National Guard troops in full combat gear and carrying assault rifles were lined up outside an education union building. The capital is under attack from Russian terrorists. The missiles hit objects in the city center, in the Shevchenkivsky district, and in the Solomyansky district. The air raid sirens are going off, and therefore the threat continues, Mayor Vitaly Klitschko posted on social media. The central streets of Kyiv have been blocked by law enforcement officers, rescue services are working. He later said important infrastructure had been hit. The strikes came 2 days after an explosion damaged the only bridge over the Kerch Strait to the Crimea Peninsula, which Putin on Sunday called an act of terrorism aimed at destroying critically important civilian infrastructure. "This was devised, carried out and ordered by the Ukrainian Special Services," he said in a video on the Kremlin's Telegram channel. Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for the blast on the bridge but has celebrated it. Senior Russian officials demanded a swift response from the Kremlin ahead of a meeting of Putin's Security Council on Monday. Commentators on Russian television have increasingly been calling for massive retaliation against Ukraine, with the military leadership facing public criticism for the first time as Russian forces have been beaten back on the battlefield. The bridge, which Putin personally opened, is a major supply route for Russian forces in southern Ukraine and a symbol of Russia's control of Crimea, the peninsula it proclaimed annexed after its troops seized it in 2014. Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev said ahead of the council meeting that Russia should kill the terrorists responsible for the attack. Russia can only respond to this crime by directly killing terrorists, as is the custom elsewhere in the world. "This is what Russian citizens expect," he was quoted as saying by state news agency TASS. Alexander Bostrykin, the head of Russia's investigative committee, said on Sunday a vehicle had exploded on the bridge, having traveled through Bulgaria, Georgia, Armenia, North Ossetia and Russia's Krasnodar region. In southeastern Ukraine, Russian shelling overnight destroyed another apartment building in the city of Zaporizhia, Regional Governor Oleksandr Staruk said early on Monday. At least 1 person died and 5 were injured in the attack, a city official said. The pre-dawn strikes were the 3rd Russian missile attack against apartment buildings in 4 days in the city, the Ukrainian-held capital of one of 4 partially occupied regions Russia claims to have annexed this month. Russia has faced major setbacks on the battlefield since the start of September, with Ukrainian forces bursting through the front lines and recapturing territory in the northeast and the south. Putin responded to the losses by ordering a mobilization of hundreds of thousands of reservists, proclaiming the annexation of occupied territory and threatening repeatedly to use nuclear weapons.